This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, kicking off maybe the biggest week in WST history. It's a big one for us. Wednesday, show number 1,000. Still can't believe that. Thanks, everyone, for their support in getting us here. And then on Friday is technically Saturday is the 4th anniversary. But we're going to have a little anniversary party, trade deadline style, with an extended show beginning at 11 in the morning. Myself, Remis, Connor will pop in as well. And we'll have a bunch of guests and basically a live stream the trade deadline for you, in addition to bringing in all of the regulars of WST you've come to know and love. So, listen, there's lots to talk about. Jets have a big week on the road coming up and taking on the Islanders tomorrow. The practice this morning. We'll get to that in a minute, and probably getting on the plane around now to head out to New York to begin this series. Going to see the Flyers again. We'll get to the Saturday night game where the Jets lost in a shootout on home ice to Philadelphia. But let's face it, the main topic around these parts and really the entire hockey world is the upcoming trade deadline, which is Friday afternoon. And a couple trades were completed on the weekend. We'll get to those. And we'll also talk about what else is cooking around the league. And Michael Traikos, as I mentioned from the Hockey News, is going to jump on with us. We'll look forward to getting his takes on where things stand right now and who we should be paying attention to as we get closer to Friday afternoon. The latest on the Jets is coming up throughout the show, but we'll also focus in on it with Mike McIntyre, who's going to join us in the second hour of the program. I know Rat River Rebels in the chat. I got the DM later on the program. We will do our duty to the people and talk about the shocking turn of events in the Elimination Chamber on Sunday a little bit later on. But hockey heavy, as you would imagine, as we get into March to the trade deadline this weekend, and then a push to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Big shout out to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Of course, our friends at Rolly's Transfer, Coolbet, Princess Auto, St. Vital Dental Center, Manitoba Battery, Wallace & Wallace, fansfirst.ca, F Apparel, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, Little Brown Jug, the Winnipeg Jets. By the way, we do have more tickets available we sold out our original allotment for the game, our final WST game of the month, which is on Friday, March 28th. But if you were looking to join us as we try to go 6-0 as a group in Section 316, jump on those right now. Your ticket also includes a beverage, which you'll be able to access through your Jets 360 app. You're going to want to go to winnipegjets.com/WST for that. Shout out to our friends at Canadian Club and Beam Suntory. And, of course, at the HSC Foundation as well, as their Fund a Need campaign continues. We're going into OT, trying to get a nice push of donations this week, heading into Friday. There's a link in the description of both the podcast and the video here on YouTube. Get on over on that. And if you do make a donation to $25 or more, you will be in a draw for an autographed jersey from the Winnipeg Jets. Let's get to it. Welcome to everybody in chat. And welcome to you, Michael Remis. How was the weekend? We got some nice weather here. Saturday was pretty chilly, but we're back in very nice temperatures. Unfortunately, that has meant the end of the skating trail for the winter, but that's fine. That means we're that much closer to legitimate spring. And of course, the playoffs.
Yeah, we're back. It's playoff season. Had a good weekend, Huss. Let me just get my camera working here. Yeah, I braved it. I went to Costco on a Saturday. I said, I'm doing it. It's the only time we can go. I put it out on Instagram with the caption LFG. Got a lot of response. I don't post a lot on Instagram, but I was shocked at how many people were asking me about the experience. So that was my Saturday.
I didn't see you actually make the post that you were going to Costco, but I did see the post of you shopping and impulse buy of a new shower head. Congratulations.
Yeah, my wife saw the shower head and was like, yeah, we're getting this. I said, sure. That's how you get
Have you installed it and used it yet?
No. Have not. It's in the box still. We'll get to it eventually. Weekends are tough time there. So at some point.
Well, anyways, congratulations on your shopping. I watched a bunch of hockey, a little bit of WWE, some golf, some curling, and now I'm ready to go. And of course, watch some trades happen around the league. Why don't we just quickly touch on that just before we get to the Jets? Because a couple of the, one of the biggest names that, was on the boards that I was a little skeptical was going to be able to be moved was Seth Jones. But Seth Jones found himself traded to the Florida Panthers. Nice pickup for Florida. He is traded from the Blackhawks to the Panthers, going from literally the outhouse to the penthouse, from one of the worst teams to a Stanley Cup champions. What's interesting about this trade, Remis, is not necessarily that Spencer Knight went the other way. They've got Bobrovsky. He's one of the top goaltending prospects and young goaltenders in hockey. An asset that I'm sure the Blackhawks, wanted and will give an opportunity for them to get their kind of franchise goalie of the future. But it was the salary that was retained. 25% of this deal, $9.5 million. So just 5 years left on this deal for Seth Jones, which means the Blackhawks are paying in excess of $10 million. They also got a first-round pick in it, of Florida. If there was my question, I was kicking this around with Dusty, and I'm interested in your thoughts, and let us know in the chat as well. Maybe we'll put this as a why not question of the day for not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray right out of the hop. If that trade had no salary retention, is it Jones for Knight straight up? Like, I do wonder the value of the cost of a first round pick, because again, this is a very highly touted goaltending prospect and a first round pick, but they're eating over $10 million in cap space. And we're going to be talking a lot about retention of deals. And I guess we've sort of seen it already. I mean, with what a couple of those third teams have done when they've been taking salaries and getting a third round pick. I just had a little bit of sticker shock at just how much money the Hawks are eating on this deal and how much of the return is for the money that is being eaten as opposed to the actual player that they're getting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought the trade for Chicago was pretty good. Seth Jones came out after a game last week and called out the team, and I guess the coaching staff saying, we're not getting any better. We're the same team we were game one, and it's got to be frustrating, playing these games for Chicago where your team is going nowhere and you stink. So for Chicago, you get a goalie in Spencer Knight, but as far as these draft picks, do they make the pick or do they cash it in for players? Because you have Connor Bedard on a rookie contract. You're kind of wasting him. The team's going nowhere. They had a lot of first-round picks the last couple of years and high ones. I'm curious what they do with the pick. And as for the retained, that's the third retained slot. I don't understand why they helped out in that Rantanen trade, retaining 4.625. It's only for a year. The other slot is Jake McCabe for $2 million the last year of that. And yeah, 2.5 for 4 seasons in exchange for a first round pick. When you put it that way, it does seem kind of high, but I like the trade for, I do like the trade for Chicago, and I like it for Florida as well. They lost Brandon Montour. He was a huge part of their team in free agency. He signed with Seattle as a free agent, and this kind of I think replaces him, $7 million. And I look at Montour's contract. He got that crazy contract with Seattle. As it was, let me just pull it up. Yes, he also got $7 million but that's until 2031. He got 7.14. So some interesting work there by Florida.
Yeah, listen, I got a lot of time for Montour and for Seattle. I mean, they were basically a team that was looking to buy talent. I mean, they've had a lot of space. They had a lot of cap space. They had a lot of space in the lineup. So they get that move. Colorado made a deal on the weekend, and they get Jimmy Vesey and Ryan Lindgren. Kind of interesting ads. I mean, Vesey has been a depth player pretty much everywhere that he's been. Not, the productive star I think that everyone thought when he was, playing out his NCAA availability and then signing with the highest bidder. And then, I mean, Lindgren has always been sort of a hard-nosed player that, I think will be sort of a playoff type guy. So anyways, that was made on the weekend. And then the Nashville Predators made a deal as well. And I'm just trying to pull that up.
Gus Nyquist to Minnesota for a second round pick.
So Minnesota, the weird thing with Minnesota is they don't really know what their cap situation is depending on Kaprizov. Like if Kaprizov cannot return before the end of the season, they've got a whole bunch of LTIR that they can use. But if he does, then they can't do it. And I think a lot of what is going on around this time right now is just figuring out how all that will fit in together. So I will say this just for Minnesota's stake. The Nyquist ad is a good one. I mean, they've been playing without Eriksson Ek, without Kaprizov, and it's really starting to hurt them right now. And the sooner they can get a guy like that in the lineup, the better for him. So, you've seen a couple of the teams in the Central Division already make moves this week. But I do get the feeling from Cheveldaev's perspective, Reem, that we are in that period where Chevy and his staff is talking to everybody. I think certainly from what we've reported, there's been some players that they have been interested in and looked at that might not be possible because of no trades. And that is part of maybe the most difficult general manager job in the National Hockey League. But as we've seen before, Chevy's found a way to add to his team. But again, we'll get to this with Elliot Friedman's comments. I think there is more of a thought that maybe the Jets won't be. They'll be adding around the periphery with some depth spots. I mean, we'll hear from Arneal and Ehlers from the game on Saturday, but why don't we get into this right now as we're talking trade deadline? Packed extended edition of 32 Thoughts came out early this morning. Here's what Elliot Friedman had to say from 32 Thoughts on the latest on the Jets.
I think he's looked around. I think he's tried to figure out what are the swings I can take, big or small. What are the swings I can take? And, I think they're limited, obviously. So I don't know if it's going to be this is a year where I could see sure, they've traded first round picks before. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. If I was in their shoes, I'd be saying this is a year where I'm doing it again. I just don't know. The prices have been high, so you might have to be prepared for that again. But I don't know that they look at it and say there's a huge swing available to us. They've got their next 3 first-round picks, so they could do it if they wanted to. I don't, as I'm sitting here on Sunday doing this, Kyle, I'm not sure that there's that kind of huge swing available to them. And I think they've looked around to see what it is.
Elliot Friedman, not sure that huge swing is available to them. I think we all know what that means. But Elliot did expand a little bit more. Here just some of the names that he would think that might be in the range of Cheveldaev and the Jets before the gun goes on Friday afternoon.
So then I think what you're doing is you're saying, how do we fit the holes? And I think one of the holes is, and again, these are the kinds of names I think about. I think about Oleksiak, has turn, left-hand shot. I think about Ferraro. He's not as big as some of the other guys, but he's got another year, left-hand shot. I think about Ristolainen. He's a right-hand shot, and you might want more of a lefty than a righty. We'll see, but he's got term as well. So that's what I wonder about, if they simply look at it as we plug our holes. Up front, again, I think they'd like to add as well, but it's the same thing. Do you simply sit there and say, where are our holes, and we plug them? If they don't land the biggest name or the sexiest name, I don't think it's for lack of trying. I just think it's because it's not available to them.
All right, so it does speak to a little bit of the two-tiered environment of the National Hockey League, but you can't complain about it. You just got to find a way around it, and it sounds like the Jets are working on doing exactly that. I will say, Reem, coming out of the game on Friday or a Saturday night, got a chance to really lock in on Rasmus Ristolainen. I would not be adverse to adding that guy to the blue line. I mean, 6'4", 220, right shot, quarterback's the power play. Obviously, that wouldn't be his role here in Winnipeg, but he would be nice. And to be honest, both of those other guys that he mentioned, Jamie Oleksiak, who's a monster, and Ferraro, who's not as big in size, but a really tenacious player. I mean, any of those players would be nice adds to the team. I do sort of covet the size of Oleksiak and Ristolainen. I love the right shot of Ristolainen as well, and different places that he might be able to fit in the lineup. But while, I mean, sure, those players aren't Mikko Rantanen or the top players on the list, that I think is what the Winnipeg Jet blue line needs. And then you can start talking about what happens at forward. And there's been some interesting reports about what the Jets have been sniffing around and have been in on. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, of those three guys, I mean, is there a guy that and let us know in the chat too, if there's one of those three players you'd maybe be willing to pay more for that you think is the best fit? Obviously, needed to keep into consideration that Oleksiak has one more and Ristolainen has 2 more years on their deals.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me is, are the Jets going to acquire a guy who's a UFA after this season, or are you going to look for a guy with term? Oleksiak, you said he's got 1 more year. Ristolainen 2, his salary is $5.1 million. One guy whose name has been mentioned a bit, who I thought was interesting, Brian Dumoulin, Stanley Cup winner with Pittsburgh. He's currently on Anaheim. He's played, top pair, more of a shutdown style role. 3.1 million. And the other name that keeps getting mentioned, I think Jeff Merrick mentioned it on Sunday Live yesterday. Murat mentioned this one, Carson Soucy in Vancouver. Now, he does mention no trade clauses. He does have one, but he has played. He's also got 1 more year, but he has played in the past in college with Pionk, Iafallo, and Dominic Toninato. Played on the same team at UMD. So, a couple interesting names out there on defense. But yeah, they're going to add someone on defense. Will it be someone who expires after this year, or will they have to pay a bit more and get someone with term? Because you look at the Jets D moving forward, I mean, the only question marks after this season are just Pionk and Samberg, who's an RFA. Pionk is a UFA. And so, well, I don't know. It seems like they're pretty set, actually. So do they look for a guy with term? That is interesting.
Well, one other thing to mention, and this is from Murat Atesh on the weekend. Murat reporting that it looks like Neil Pionk could be the recipient of an extension potentially this week before the trade deadline happens. Murat said, the extension's probably in between 5 to 7 years, and a slight increase from the 5.875 that he's making. So probably somewhere in between $6 and $7 million. You can give us your thoughts on that. We'll get to that later on. There's a couple of interesting trade possibilities that we've heard coming out of, some of the national reporters down south of the border. The ESPN piece talking about the Jets' interest in Mikko Rantanen. And so we'll touch on that coming up in a few minutes. And then we'll also get to a little bit of feedback after the Saturday shootout loss to the Philadelphia Flyers. I just saw Dom Zappia in chat mentioning that we had a chance to see both Ristolainen and Ferraro last week here in Winnipeg against the Jets. He said Risto and Ferraro were oppressive versus the Jets in their last couple of opponents. I did enjoy, PLD NYC says, don't disagree with what Elliot Friedman said, but I think what you can say the same about every Canadian market at the deadline. I'm not sure that that's entirely true. I mean, the Jets certainly, as we've seen and heard plenty about, on way more no trade lists than many of those other teams. And T. Will says, not true. I've been told that there are some Canadian teams that 98% of the league have dreamed their whole lives of playing for. So some good stuff there with in the chat. We'll take a little rip around the NHL in just a moment with Michael Traikos from the Hockey News. Looking forward to that. Do want to mention, though, gang, that we are going in to overtime for the Winnipeg Sports Talk with the Health Sciences Center Foundation Fund a Need campaign. We've got 1 week left to make a donation and help us purchase new equipment for the Health Sciences Center Adult Emergency Department and help the HSC Manitoba's hospital deliver tomorrow's health care today. If you haven't already, check out the link. It is in the description. Maybe, Remis, you can stick it in the chat, and it'll take you to the donations page. Any donation of $25 or more, you will get a tax receipt for it. For tax time, and you'll be entered to win an autographed jersey by the Winnipeg Jets. And of course, this is going to go to very important emergency equipment we're looking to get for the Health Sciences Center downtown. We had incredible support at the gala dinner a couple weeks ago, the online auction. Can't wait to see Mark out at Aikens Lake this summer for that. But in the meantime, right now, we're trying to finish strong throughout this week, right through till Friday, with overtime on the Fund a Need campaign. Any donations greatly appreciated, and all helping do important things at the HSC. And if you click on link, there's a little article on my health journey, as well as more on the HSC Foundation. And of course, you can sign up for the newsletter as well to keep up for future opportunities to be part of improving the lives of Manitobans. All right, before we welcome in Michael Traikos, let me give a big thanks to our friends at Rolly's Transfer. Guess what? It's feeling like spring around here. And you know what that means? Spring cleaning and spring moving. If you have a move coming up, why don't you leave it to Rolly's, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, family owned and operated in this city for over 60 years. What you're going to want to do, gang, is to head on over to Rollies.com. Click on the top right corner of their website. You'll see where it says request an estimate. Drop in WST in the promo code, first off, for a special discount on moving services and moving supplies, and then let them know when you're planning on moving, where you're going to, and let them know what needs to be moved. And the friendly staff at Rollies will turn it around quickly with a great quote and get you locked in for moving day, and to get the white glove treatment that Rollies has been famous for over 6 decades. For your next move, make it Rollies. Find out more or request an estimate today online at Rollies.com. We mentioned spring cleanings happening in and around your places, your garages, your property. How about your grill? If it's been a minute since you've been by the dentist, I would suggest you make an appointment down at St. Vital Dental Center with my pal, Dr. Terry, and his amazing staff at 167 St. Anne's. Of course, St. Vital Dental provides pretty much all dental services for 6-month-olds all the way up to 99 and 100-year-olds. They'll do it all, including dental implants, root canals, fillings, all that stuff. But right now, what about a cleaning? If you've left it way too long, that was a great time to do a spring cleaning of your mouth as well. And the friendly folks at St. Vital Dental Center will be happy to have you. Find out more on all St. Vital Dental Center services online at stvitaldental.ca. They're at 167 St. Anne's with convenient free parking right behind the building. And hey, we're not worrying as much about car and truck batteries as it warms up a little bit, but we're just about ready to get back out on boats and dirt bikes and more. With all those things, you need batteries. And the one thing that we've counted on throughout the winter is that Manitoba Battery is your local option with the lowest prices in town while you shop locally. That's right. Shop local, beat the pants off the big box stores in price, and get the best customer service, whether you go in-store to Logan Avenue or Dovercourt Drive, or give them a call or order online and have them deliver it to you for free with any purchase over $60. It is just that easy. For all your battery needs, shop local and get the best prices around at Manitoba Battery, 2 Winnipeg locations, and online at manitobabattery.com. All right, let's talk some hockey right now. Lots coming out of the weekend, and we welcome in Michael Traikos from the Hockey News. Michael, what's going on? It's great to have you back on Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks for having me on, Hustler. It's been too long since we last talked.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, man, we've got a lot to get to. Listen, I know you were around it. We're sort of removed, but just I wanted to quickly get your thoughts on the aftermath of the Four Nations before we dive into the trade deadline and all we're happening around. I mean, it seemed like there was a lot of doubters about this event, and by the time we actually dropped the puck on it, I'm not sure we've had as much buy-in from not just hockey fans, but people that weren't hockey fans before probably since 2010. What were your takeaways from the success of the Four Nations and what that might mean for the NHL moving forward?
Yeah, I was one of those doubters, especially when guys like Alex Pietrangelo and some other guys were getting quote-unquote hurt right before the tournament started. I thought, oh boy, here we go. We got ourselves a glorified all-star game that no one really wants to be a part of. But, we've probably said this to death. Like, everyone was wrong, whoever was thinking that. And, we're 1 year removed from the Olympics. So the Four Nations really did the job in terms of just kind of whetting the appetite. I think going into the Olympics now, there's a ton of buzz. Not that there wasn't going to be, but even more so. Canada and the U.S. better play in the gold medal at the Olympics. If not, it's probably going to be a bit of a downer. But just to have all the countries represented, I think it's going to be top notch. But yeah, I can't wait for another best on best.
It was something else. I was lucky enough to be there in Boston for it. And I mean, I said to the guys afterwards that, if I'm ever at a game that rivals what we saw, I'll be a very, very lucky person, because it was something that stayed with us for a long time. And like with all the political BS around it, certainly I can tell you for the Canadians in the building, it felt like a game that we needed to win more than maybe anything else. And it is kind of funny because this was a put together exhibition tournament, but it truly ended up having, a far more greater impact and I think important, certainly to Canadians. But I can tell you, it was the story in sports south of the border all week as well, coming out of that crazy night at the Bell Center in Montreal. So definitely good news for hockey. Moving on, right out of the Four Nations, we now get into this stretch to the trade deadline, and interested in your thoughts on the Jets and their predicament right now. Top of the Central Division, top of the Western Conference, with some pretty significant
top of the league
assets. So absolutely. Right there with Washington. The number one team, but really focusing on trying to get that 1 seed, playing the 8, but also beef up the team to avoid the pitfalls that took them out early in the last few seasons. What do you make of just the Jets' situation right now and what Kevin Cheveldayoff might be up to in the next 5 days?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, you look at the team as a whole, and you don't really see the holes there. Like, I'm in Toronto, where it seems like you've got a team that's built for the regular season, and then you're wondering, are these guys built for the playoffs? I don't get that same feeling when I'm talking about Winnipeg. For one, they've got the best goalie in the world right now in Connor Hellebuck. And then they've just got a great identity. I don't see any weaknesses. That being said, you're in a division with Dallas and Minnesota, and right now the way it's shaping up, you may have to play a team like Colorado in the first round, or you may see Dallas in the second round. So you do have to sort of keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And I don't know exactly if they're going to go big game hunting at the deadline. That's not really Chevy's kind of MO as we go throughout the years, but I keep hearing that they could be after a guy like Brandon Tanev, maybe a Jake Evans. I think that bottom six guy that plays with some grit, and if we're talking about Tanev, a guy that the Jets have a lot of familiarity with, I think that probably makes a lot of sense. Another option, Rasmus Ristolainen, I think, having another guy that can play sort of a tough style on the back end is going to help them. But, it's less about what the Jets need and more about, what you're going to be facing in the first couple rounds. You know that any sort of route to the Stanley Cup has to go probably through Dallas, maybe through Edmonton and Vegas. If that's the case, then, Winnipeg probably does have to stock up and get a little bit more depth.
Yeah, I mean, the two spots that we've talked about, and this is not really new. I mean, we had the same conversation last year, and they went and acquired Sean Monahan, albeit a little earlier, is that 2C spot. And listen, Vlad Nemesnikov's been everything they could have hoped for and more based on what they gave up to get him. But there is a thought that, that line with Vlad, Ehlers, and Perfetti, while they've been really good as of late, can that line on its own handle the increased physicality and everything that comes with the Stanley Cup playoffs? And that's why we've talked a lot about the 2C position, potentially of a guy like Brock Nelson. Now, we don't even know whether Lou's going to be a seller or not. I mean, the Islanders play the Rangers tonight. If they can win this game, they once again come within scratching distance of both Detroit and Columbus in those wild card spots. I would love to see that. I mean, I think the add of a guy like that would kind of really significantly change the look of that line and add a lot to it. But it really does seem like it's the blue line. And you mentioned Ristolainen. We saw him in person in Winnipeg on Saturday night. The Jets are going to play them again later on this week before the deadline. I know Elliott was mentioning him. Jamie Alexiak is a possibility, and that's another big player because when you look at the Jets' blue line, like Morrissey's all-world, Dylan DeMello playing with him, not a big physical pairing. And Dylan Sandberg's brought a lot to it, and Neil Pionk hits, but he's not huge. And obviously, you've got Logan Stanley on the back end, but he does come with a shall we say, a risk reward that sometimes you might not want to have out in high leverage moments in the playoffs. So I do think there's some smoke in and around the blue line. Let me ask you this, and we've been kicking this around earlier on the show. What did you make of the Seth Jones deal? And I ask this in the terms of the market right now, because listen, he was a disgruntled player, a good guy. He goes to Florida. They get Spencer Knight and a first-round pick. But I wonder, what's the value of a first-round pick right now? Because it almost seems that, like, Chicago's paying more than $10 million on this contract. I mean, is the first-round pick a $10 million asset, and the trade was Jones for Spencer Knight?
Yeah, that's one I think I didn't understand, is that if you're going to retain that much salary, why do you have to, I guess that's where the pick kind of comes in. I like the fact that Chicago was trying to find a home for Seth Jones. Obviously, it was showing on how unhappy he's been. He went to Chicago thinking that this was going to be a team that, was going to go through maybe a 1, maybe 2-year rebuild or retool and be back at it. But it's just been a disaster there. So I'm happy for Seth Jones that he gets to Florida. But yeah, you're right. Like the value, like the fact that you only have to give up Spencer Knight, a first-round pick, and then you get Chicago basically retaining a lot of salary, that's a good deal for Florida. And I know, where I'm at in Toronto, there's a lot of people going, oh boy, Florida just got one of the best defensemen that was available at the trade deadline. What did the Toronto Maple Leafs, what do the Tampa Bay Lightning, what do some of the other teams in the East have to do to kind of keep up with the Joneses, pardon the pun? But that's the one thing I'm looking at this deadline is there's not a lot of big fish. Like you mentioned, Brock Nelson. Is he the biggest guy that's available right now? Like, forget about Mikko Rantanen, forget about Paterson in Vancouver, and maybe Erik Karlsson, who I don't see any of those three guys moving. But just in terms of who's actually out there, it's kind of a weakened market right now. And I think that's probably why you're hearing some of the talk about like what a Braden Shen is going to cost if you want to get him. Heck, if you want to get a Luke Shen, what's that going to cost? And that's really the fear out there. If you are a buyer, is you're probably going to have to spend some because there's just not a lot of pieces out there. It seems like everyone's going after the same third line forwards and number 4, number 5 defensemen.
Yeah, the thing that it's attractive, I think, would be to me and a team like Winnipeg and some others about Nelson is that he can play center, he can play top 6, he's a 30-goal scorer, he's big, he's strong. I mean, there are some real things that you'd like, but he also doesn't come, like, for instance, would I love to have Braden Shen on my team right now? Absolutely. Do I want to sign up for him at 34, 35, 36? I'm not sure. And like with any of these deals, Michael, I mean, the contract is such a big part of it. I mean, the Seth Jones is a perfect example of it. I mean, we're not talking about quote unquote hockey deals very often. That's a part of it. But the business side and the cap, notwithstanding that it is going up in the future, I mean, is a huge part of every one of these deals. And like for a team like Winnipeg, when we talk about Ristolainen or Oleksiak, I think there's an attraction that there's an extra year or two on the deals. But the ones that often are hardest to move, I mean, I'll be honest, I would be very hesitant to sign up for Elias Pettersson right now, despite what we've seen in the past of him, at $11.5 million with that much term left. I mean, it's a huge risk that if it doesn't pan out, you're sitting there with a big chunk of your cap devoted to a player that you have to have perform that right now looks absolutely lost. And I don't think for a minute that he won't be able to get it back at some point. But you can understand why general managers are, leery and having to weigh their options significantly, because what is the case right now wasn't necessarily the case 6 months or a year ago, but you have to make these deals done in the present time.
Yeah, I'm not looking to get a project. If I'm a team that's going for a Stanley Cup this year, I'm not taking my chances with that. Pettersson's going to, find his game in the last few weeks of the season. And I'm kind of I understand what you're saying. Like, it seems like in the last couple of years, GMs have really kind of shied away from the rental market and are looking for guys with term, but you don't want too much term. Like you said, you don't want that Braden Shen where, he's 33 years old. He's got another 3 years. What does he look like at age 35, 36? I'm more, looking at a guy like Scott Laughton, who I think he's got another year remaining, but he's only 30 years old. I know what a Scott Laughton is. I'm not going to be asking him to be, playing a different role than he has been in Philly. So I think that's where, the market's probably going to gravitate to. Same thing with like a Brandon Tanev or a Joel Armia. I know what those players are. I know what I'm going to get this year and the next year if I decide to re-sign those guys. But it's just a little bit of less risky, and still you get a decent reward for it.
I am interested to see whether some of these kind of hockey deals pop out that no one's really talking about. I mean, we famously talk about Chevy getting Paul Stastny in 2018. Absolutely nobody saw that coming. And he came in and helped the team get to the conference finals and was a huge, huge win. And I mean, last year, Michael, there was that Buffalo, Colorado trade that I think caught a lot of people off guard. Middlestat going for Boehm Byram. It is obvious, and I get it, it's sort of the low-lying fruit for us to talk about Brock Nelson. He's a pending UFA. The team's probably not going to make the playoffs. Maybe he is available. But what will be really interesting as we get closer to Friday as to whether the Cheveldayoffs of the National Hockey League can unearth some players that maybe we haven't been talking about that can be a fit that maybe are a little bit more off the radar.
Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned that Stastny trade by Chevy. Like that probably is his biggest deadline move. If you look at, all the every trade deadline that Winnipeg's been through, like maybe Monahan last year would be, up there with it. I thought that was a real savvy move, but it's typically like Chevy doesn't go swing for the fences at the deadline nor at free agency. Like I don't want to say he stands pat, but I think he knows what he's got with this roster, and he's not really looking to tinker a whole lot with it. So I'd be surprised if they, I know you're mentioning Brock Nelson. I would be kind of shocked to see Brock Nelson get moved. And if he does get moved, I'd be shocked if Winnipeg's the team that is sort of putting all their chips in, trying to get a Brock Nelson. I just don't see that happening. And I see it more of, you might not get your number 2 center. You may get a guy that could, in a pinch, play on your second line, but is more likely a bottom 6 guy.
I have to quickly ask you about the Leafs before we go. I mean, the Leafs are usually rumored to be involved in everyone, and I'm not sure that that's just part of the business or whatever. But like, they're in a spot right now, and we were talking about this earlier. I mean, a dogfight with Tampa and the Florida Panthers, and much like there's a huge carrot for the Jets to be first in the West, there's a huge carrot to be first in that division. Because, I mean, if the Leafs wouldn't have been first, you'd have Tampa and Florida beating the living hell out of each other, probably for 6 or 7 games, and you'd be getting one of the wild card teams. Is Brad Treleving going to be the hero come Friday and make some big moves, or is this just part of the discourse where anytime a guy's available, we talk about how he might fit in with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I think it's very much the latter.
Yeah.
The Leafs don't have a whole lot of cap space. And I hear what you're saying. They desperately need to finish first because, yeah, you're right. If I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs, I don't want to play any of those Florida teams. I'd much rather look at a wildcard team, like maybe it's Detroit, maybe it's Ottawa. Definitely an easier matchup that way. But yeah, they're probably going to get something. We just saw Florida make a move. That was really the first big move that we saw out of the Atlantic Division. So I'm expecting that with that first domino to fall, that we're just going to see more and more pieces go. I think the more likely one, forget about Braden Shen, is probably, they're going to be in the mix for maybe a Yanni Gourde, maybe a Brandon Tanev. Obviously Chris Tanev plays in Toronto, so picking up his younger brother makes a lot of sense, especially for what the Leafs need, which is just some more guys that can play playoff hockey. So I think that's the sort of focus right now. But, unless the Leafs convince some team to really swallow a lot of salary, I think they're only working with like less than $3 million under the books. So it's going to be tough for them to move a piece out and still kind of get better at the deadline.
Michael, great chat as always. What's cooking over at the Hockey News on this busy week for everyone?
Well, we're just, like everyone else, we're really focused on trade deadline. We just had our Future Watch magazine drop as well. And on Friday, we're going to be live streaming the day. So you have to check us out at thehockeynews.com.
Right on. Thanks for doing this, pal. Let's do it again soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. There's Michael Traikos from the Hockey News with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Mike McIntyre coming up in a few moments. Hey, I do want to shout out our friends at Canadian Club, Maker's Mark, Winnipeg Whiskey Festival. Another huge success on the weekend. And again, thanks to everyone that joined us on Thursday for our Whiskey Fest event down at the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. Great to see many of you returnees and everyone else that joined us. Of course, if you're talking Canadian whiskey, the standard is Canadian Club. You can pop by and pick that up at your local next trip to your Manitoba Liquor Mart. All right, let's get Remo back in here. Remo, the one thing that we should do a little bit just to tee up Mike, because I have a feeling we're going to spend a lot of time looking ahead with Mike, was Saturday night. And, it was a weird game. I mean, it was a game that I thought Philly played quite well and played hard. Similar to the San Jose game, it was sort of a lopsided shot clock early on in the game. And then the Jets really closed that gap. But man, that 7-foot goalie on the Flyers, Fedotov, he gave the Jets fits on Saturday, including 2 power plays in the final 5 minutes where it seemed like it was almost a fait accompli that was going to be the difference.
Yeah, it was funny. I was listening to the CJOB pregame, and they were going over Fedotov's numbers, saying how he's been inconsistent this year. And you look at his numbers on the season, 8.83 save percentage, 3.11 goals against. Started betting on the overs, Hustler. And it's funny, you look at, didn't really see, you see him big in the net, of course, but after the game, when he's hugging all the guys, he's towering over every Flyers player. It was incredible. And yeah, the Winnipeg Jets power play, it's officially in a slump, 0 for 16. in their last 6 games. They had a great chance. Nikolai Ehlers, I thought, was going to end it. Kyle Connor. I mean, the puck movement, I thought, looked pretty good. They just couldn't put one past the Flyers goalie. And now it's 2 games in a row here where the Jets, going up against, are they going up against a hot goalie? Or are they shooting it right at him? Thought the Flyers and Preds both did a great job blocking shots. I think my level of concern meter, we had to ask, pretty low. I think they're going to figure it out. But yeah, you'd like to see them win there with the 2 power plays. I'm shout out to Morgan Barron, who returned from injury. I was drawing two penalties in the end, in the third period. So that game was there for the taking. Credit to the opponent for coming to play. These teams are coming hard against the Jets. They did come off the 11-game win streak. Lost one, lost another in overtime. Not going to get too worked up, disappointing. But I don't know, do you want me to say good job, good effort? I don't know what more I've kind of gone to the buffet on this.
Hey, Fedotov, have you ever seen Strange Brew? The Bob and Doug McKenzie movie? You were probably pretty young. Maybe you would have the comedy movie. Anyways, many of you in the chat and listening on podcast will remember Strange Brew. Fedotov, I could not help thinking about the goalie from the team of the Elsinore Brewery when I looked at that guy, because he sort of looks like a bit of a massive, giant, near robot. But he was, and I'll say this entire week for Kyle Connor. Connor is getting so many chances, Reem. It was Mark Scheifele who scored his 34th on Saturday for the goal. But Kyle Connor has had, he had the 10 shots against St. Louis and wasn't able to score until the shootout. He had 4, and then he had another 7 shots, I think, on net and 16 attempts in the game against the Predators. And had a couple glorious chances as well, as they just went off the stick or they were saved. So, I mean, that was a game the Jets certainly could have won. But Torts liked the way that his team played, and I have to admit, I did as well. I mean, that was not. They certainly didn't. They're not folding right now. They're playing hard for Torts, and a beautiful goal by Jamie Drysdale that got it, and that ended up being the situation. And man, I will say this. Fedotov, I don't know, maybe he was just in the Jets' heads a little bit. It wasn't great in the shootout. Obviously, nobody scored. But Matvei Michkov, that move that he put on Hellebuck, you can see why he was such a highly touted draft pick and prospect, and with a very, very bright future moving forward with that move that he put on Helly.
Yeah, we haven't seen the Jets in too many shootouts. We've seen them a lot of overtimes. They usually get it done. I thought their puck control and puck movement looked good, but maybe, I don't know, they just couldn't beat him. I do have the poll out. What's the biggest reason for the Jets' loss? 55% say Fedotov stood on his head. And then the shootout, we haven't really seen too many shootouts from the Jets this year.
Only 2, and both this week.
Have you seen Velarde shoot? Even so, they didn't, Kyle Connor's usually pretty solid. They couldn't put one past him. And that was a gorgeous goal by Michkov, cutting to the middle and using those edges to go back and putting a roof. It's the beautiful picture as the thumbnail. Showed it to Terrence Lee, who took that one.
A far cry from the was it Konechny that took the first shot for the Flyers in the shootout?
I got a double.
That might have been the lamest shootout attempt.
Where he shot it like super slow
I've ever seen. It was just like he gave up before. He's like, oh my God, this is Hellebuck, and he just sort of pushed it right into his pad. Michkov did not do the same thing, and Philly ended up getting the 2 points. So the Jets now, as we go into action tonight in the NHL, have an 8-point lead on the Dallas Stars, but the Stars still do have a game in hand. So it's getting a little bit tighter after just a so-so week for the Winnipeg Jets, as opposed to that crazy run that they'd been on. Funny enough, the Jets still, though, in their last 10, 8-1-1, and the Dallas Stars 7-2-1. They did lose to Columbus last week. By the way, shout out to Columbus. Beat Dallas, beat Detroit, and then another win against Detroit. They now have a 2-point lead on the second wild card in the first wild card so far. But just to wrap this up and tee up our conversation with Mike, let's hear a little bit from after the game. Scott Arniel talked about just why it seemed to be so hard to generate goals Saturday night against Philly.
Well, the goaltender has a lot to do with it. Obviously, another team that this team does a real good job of trying to get in shot lanes, and that we're sitting here saying we didn't even attempt to shoot the puck and whatever. You can't criticize when guys are taking that many opportunities and getting that many looks. Earlier 2 weeks ago or earlier in the year, all that stuff was going in, especially if we got that much quantity. Last few games there, goaltenders have made stops, and we've gotten snake bitten a couple of times, and for us, that's just stay with it, stick with what we're doing, and some of those will start to go in.
All right, so there's Arnie on the lack of goal scoring. Also, I don't think was loving what the team did at 3-on-3 in the 5-minute overtime before the game went to a shootout.
When you don't have the puck, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do. You can't get aggressive. You can't. It's hard. You have to sit and wait for your opportunity to stab and to try to get the puck back. That might be off a missed shot. That might be off maybe an errant pass. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter really. I mean, if we don't have the puck, and we just had the puck the whole time, and it just felt like, and then KC gets that glorious chance. I think it hit one of their forwards, and then in the crease. So those are things that, they as the season goes, they go your way and they bounce the other way at times, and just stick with what we're doing.
All right, so there's a 4. Let's skip over to 6 now. This has been a little bit, the first time we've had this topic all year long. I mean, a little bit of an extended drought for the power play. They're still above 30%, 30.5 on the season. But man, a power play goal would have come in handy in that final 5 minutes. Here's Arnie on the power play, not being able to score in those final 5 minutes with 2 opportunities.
I thought we had some great looks again, just like last night. 2 nights ago. I thought we had some great looks. He had a glorious one right there, and we had a few that were, real tight, real close. Whatever. I'm not criticizing our power play. Our power play has been exceptional. Right now, the last 2 games, I thought in Ottawa it wasn't what it needed to be. I thought the last 2 games we were dangerous. Spent the whole time in their end of the rink.
And just a matter of poor puck luck as to why you haven't been able to convert?
That's all part of it. There's good goaltending. There's other people getting their sticks on plays. These are sort of the things that happen over the course of the season, whether it's your power play or whether it's our 5-on-5 scoring. These are kind of the ebbs and flows that happen throughout the season. It's just sticking with it. We don't get frustrated by situations like this. We just kind of move on. When we get our next chance, we look to bury that puck.
All right, now, one more from Arnie on Morgan Barron's return, as Michael mentioned, came in and, was a big factor late in the game in drawing those penalties. Here's what Arnie had to say about Morgan Barron, who played his first game back.
No, I thought I hadn't played in a while. It can be, getting a game like that that's quick. I thought he was real good. And like you said, he drew those penalties. Would have been nice if we had scored for him and, got him one. But at the end of the day, they did a lot of what we needed. I think that once he continues to get back up to game speed, you can't emulate it in practice or extra skating. So him just getting those reps, is important. It's also some fresh legs for us tonight, which certainly helped.
All right, so there's head coach Scott Arniel. One more clip from the weekend, and this is Nikolai Ehlers, who talked about the game and just not being able to finish on the power play late.
Game like that leave you feeling?
I don't really know yet. I don't exactly think we played great. I think at times we dominated. When we got the pucks deep, we're a pretty good team.
Yeah. What kind of opportunity were you handed there late in the third with back-to-back power plays?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones you got to put a game away at that point. You got to take advantage, and we haven't been able to do that. So I think our power play has gotten better over the last few games, at least in the right direction. But still too many mistakes and too many bad passes.
I feel like a goalie show out there.
I mean, I hit my shot exactly the way I wanted to. I think his glove was just lucky to be there.
All right, so there's Nikolai Ehlers. We'll talk about it more with Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press. That's going to join us in just a couple of minutes. Let's do a little fan feedback for Fans First, your number one spot for buying and selling Winnipeg tickets on the resale market with no fees. What you see is what you pay, which is what has made Fans First the most popular resale outlet for Winnipeg fans. I can tell you, actually, I had both my seats and I didn't realize it till late, and was able to very simply sell one of the pairs on Fans First on the weekend, and lo and behold, boom, money in your account the next business day. Great stuff from Fans First. Now, we just did the chat, the question from Michael. Well, here's the one. How concerned are you about the Jets' power play recent struggles? Very concerned. 0 for 16 is a problem. That's only 13%. A little concerned at 49%. And not worried. They're still number one at 37%. We also had, I see some love for the Elsinore Brewery and the strange brew. Huss remembers his movies, LOL, from Tico Polly and Darth Skater. Everything I learned about the real world growing up, I learned from Strange Brew. But Jets fan 24 mentioned Jets tried going 5-hole both times and it backfired. Get the puck high. Yeah, that was Konechny that had the worst shootout attempt of all time in that game. But the other fan feedback we have was just the biggest reason for the shootout loss to Philly. It was Ivan Fedotov standing on his head with 57%. Power play struggles, 19. Missed chances in OT in a shootout, 11. And it just wasn't their night, 11%. Keep your fan feedback coming. It is brought to you by Fans First, by fans, for fans, no fees. Check out the site today over at fansfirst.ca. All right, as we dive into Jet stuff, huge thanks to Princess Auto for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Founded in Winnipeg, headquartered in Winnipeg, and continuing to support our Winnipeg sports teams and outlets like Winnipeg Sports Talk. Of course, Princess Auto Stadium is the home of the Bombers, and Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is waiting for you at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, Brandon, or shop online 24/7, 365 over at princessauto.com. And speaking of great Winnipeg companies, Wallace & Wallace has been the leaders in fencing and overhead doors since 1946, serving residential and commercial customers. As we get out of winter, if your property needs the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter's done a number on your old one, give them a call. They've got vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if you need a new garage door, they've got the largest selection of overhead garage doors in town, one perfect to match your home, but also to add value to it at the same time. Pop by and see them on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston if you want to pop in to the showroom. But you can also give them a call, 452-2700. Our friends at Wallace & Wallace will be happy to pop down and give you a free estimate. You can also check them out online at wallacefences.com. And just before we bring in Mike, guys, spring is just about here, and that means grads and weddings, and F Apparel is ready for it. If you need to step up your menswear game heading into the new seasons, get on down to F Apparel at 190 Smith Street. You can, if you have a grad in the family, or if you are graduating, make sure to talk to them about their great deal. Get a new suit for grad. They'll give you a free shirt and tie with it. And, of course, a great discount for wedding parties when they get their suits for the big day over at F Apparel. Pop by and see them, 190 Smith Street. Check them out online. at that's EPHapparel.com. And you can also schedule and book a time to come in for a fitting there as well. All right, let's bring in Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press as the Jets hit the road. Mike, what's going on? How's the weekend?
It was a good weekend. Yeah, really good. There's a little bit of spring in the air. Huss, it's starting to feel a little more like playoff hockey weather. And I guess we look at the schedule, and that's not a big surprise, right? We're entering, I always not sure of the terminology. Are we entering the final, have we hit the quarter pole or the 3/4 pole? I don't know if you reference what's left or what you've left behind, but in any event, 61 down, 21 to go. We've flipped the calendar to March, so we can now say next month the playoffs start, and feels like another box will be checked off as of this Friday. Usually once the deadline comes and goes, it just feels like that's when teams really kind of put the throttle down. And so, yeah, kind of gearing up here for a big week, or what could be a big week for the Jets. Interested to see how this plays out. And yeah, love the weather.
Yeah, no doubt. It's always, I look out and it's always a little sad when you see them put up the barriers and say the trail is closed.
Yes.
But that does mean that we're that much closer. Although I will just say, I have no idea why they didn't wait till Monday to do that. Like they threw it up. We had this, it was cold on Saturday.
Yeah.
And all it ended up was being just a not groomed trail. There were still 1 million people skating in and around on it. I would have said just wait till Monday. Anyways, that's a editorial that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Let's get to the Jets. Listen, before we talk deadline and whatnot, what have you made of the way the teams look coming out of the break? I mean, they get the shootout win against St. Louis. Two late comebacks against St. Louis and San Jose.
Yeah.
They handle business against the Ottawa Senators, then finally lose a game for the first time in over a month to the Nashville Predators, and then come back home for what was a pretty evenly played slog against the Flyers, where they just couldn't score on Fedotov. The one thing, as you've heard us already talking about, is that the power play hasn't been clicking coming out, and that has been such a hammer for the Jets to use all season long. But, I mean, when you look back, how would you categorize the week past before the Jets hit the road?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, Huss? Like, they played 5 games since the break, and you could make an argument that they could be 5-0, but they also could be like 1-4 potentially. Like you said, those 2 late comebacks, which they then went on to win in extra time. And, the other day, of course, that game goes right down to the wire as well. So, yeah, I mean, the Jets have not looked quite as sharp as maybe what we saw before the break, but they're 3-1-1. Obviously, folks might focus a little more on the 1-1 part because that's been the last 2 games. But they did win the 3 out of the break, maybe not the prettiest of victories. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like they haven't been quite as sharp. I think there's a couple reasons for it. They're not in the business of trotting out excuses, but I'll throw a couple out there. They have not had much practice time at all. I think they've had, they had a couple practices before the schedule resumed, but don't forget, Josh Morrissey, Kyle Connor were not part of those practices. Those guys were at the Four Nations. The power play, they've had like 1 practice. And I think, over the break, I imagine a lot of teams spent time figuring out what kind of adjustments they need to make. And when you're facing the Jets, that would mean trying to adjust to the league's most potent power play. So I think we've seen the other teams maybe adjust more than Winnipeg's been able to adjust. And I think some of that rust can be attributed to the Four Nations break. It stopped everyone's momentum for sure. And the Jets haven't been able to quite pick up where they left off, specifically on the power play. But I think overall, just goal scoring, this team, they've been a little snake bitten the last couple games. And certainly the other goaltenders have something to do with that. You could also say the opponents they've played, they're facing some desperate opponents who are fighting for their playoff lives. And I think there's just some puck luck that probably hasn't gone Winnipeg's way as well. And, that sort of thing will ebb and flow over the course of a long season. Right now, they seem to be in a little bit of a downward trend. I don't think there's anything about Winnipeg's game over these last few that really concerns me, and quite frankly, doesn't really surprise me. I mean, you're just like they weren't going to go 82-0 when they got off to that red hot start. They also weren't going to, they had won 11 in a row. That was going to end at some point. And I think, as we've said at different points this year, a little adversity for this group is not the worst thing. Yes, you want to hit mid-April playing your best hockey, but I think you want to learn some lessons along the way. And so, this latest little dose is, we'll see what the Jets can do in terms of making now some of their own adjustments. They're in a very good position, obviously, as it relates to not just first in their division and first in the conference, but look at the Washington Capitals. They've lost 3 straight games in regulation. And I believe, Huss, correct me if I'm wrong, I think all 3 of those were on home ice as well. For sure, 2 of them were. And all of a sudden, the Jets are very much in the driver's seat for the President's Trophy now as well. So they're in a great spot. I don't think there's anything to be overly concerned about, but yeah, they've hit a bit of a little bit of turbulence here in the last couple games.
Well, listen, they'll have an opportunity to get right back at it tomorrow against the Islanders, and who are playing tonight against the Rangers at MSG. Yeah. And then you got Philly and Jersey, who just lost Jack Hughes last night. We'll see how long he's going to be out for. And then the Carolina Hurricanes to finish up this trip on the 9th. Of course, the 9th is after the 7th, Mike. And I guess I'll ask you this. When the team gets back to Winnipeg late next Sunday, how different will this team look, if at all, than they did getting on the plane today?
They'll look different because I can't envision a scenario where, like, Kevin Cheveldayoff does nothing. That would be shocking. Are they going to delete from their current roster? I don't think so. Like, maybe there's a hockey trade to be made that involves a piece of their roster going the other way, but I think picks and prospects are the much more likely play here, because I think the Jets love what they have going this year. They love the room. They love the chemistry, and they don't want to take away from that, and there's something legitimate about that. Like, I did a piece a couple weeks ago that I found the exercise really interesting. We all get caught up in trade deadline hype and, big swings and rumors and all that. I went back and looked at the last 10 Stanley Cup winners, the vast majority of whom at this point in their seasons were in a really good place. We haven't had not since the LA Kings from whatever many years ago, where they kind of snuck into the playoffs and then caught lightning in the bottle and went on to win the cup. Like, most teams that win the cup are in pretty good shape at the trade deadline. Sorry, the St. Louis Blues would be the notable exception. I'm forgetting them from 6 years ago, where they, of course, but they were trending up by the trade deadline and they didn't do anything. They just kind of kept the roster that they had. But that group was a group that was certainly playing well, and they carried that all the way through to the cup run. But so most teams that win the cup, Huss, don't take big swings at the deadline. They more like singles and maybe doubles, if we're using baseball analogies, more depth type pieces. And I do think that's more likely what the Jets are going to do here. And I realize, for some fans, they'll feel disappointed if the Jets don't land some like huge name. They might feel disappointed, or they might say that Winnipeg lost the deadline. I think it's important not to kind of lose perspective that what they have right now has got them to the top of the entire NHL over a large sample size, which is 60 plus regular season games. I don't think they're going to stand pat, because I think, if you're now trying to win 16 playoff games, you want as many potential weapons going into battle as you can have. And I think, especially on the depth end of things, whether it's bottom six forwards or depth defensemen, the Jets certainly need to shore that up. And part of that, Huss, is for folks who maybe haven't been paying attention to what's going on with the Moose. Not only is Nikita Chibrikov done for the year, and he played really well when he had that recall earlier this year for the Jets, so did Parker Ford, who's now out long-term as well. I don't know if that's season ending for Parker Ford, but there's two very capable depth forwards that are no longer options, at least right now, for the Jets, and one who for sure won't be an option. So I do think they're going to add. And one important thing to note, Huss, is as of this Friday, rosters expand. You're not just limited to the 23-man roster and the Jets are at that 23-man limit right now. I maintain it's a big reason we haven't seen a trade made yet. I go back to they don't want to lose anybody that they have right now. And if they were to add a player today, somebody's got to be put on waivers. And so I think by Friday, they have a lot of cap space. That won't be a concern. And I do think they'll add, maybe 2 or 3 pieces. I just don't know that there's going to be anybody added that totally blows us away. But again, Kevin Cheveldayoff keeps his cards close to the vest. And I still go back to 2018 when the Paul Stastny bombshell hit. Nobody had Stastny on really anybody's radar. And so could Kevin Cheveldayoff kind of channel a play from the past? Absolutely, he could. And there's certainly some names out there and probably names not out there that could be on the move. So it all makes for a very interesting week. But to your original question, I do expect when this team flies back, I think they're coming back Sunday night after the game in Carolina. The new players, if they add, they may not be with the team until maybe they get back home next week, depending on where they're coming from. But I do think the Jets roster will have expanded. I think it'll be more in the depth range, likely forward and defense.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I also do maybe hold out a little bit more hope / expectation that they may, not necessarily just add a few depth pieces. I guess the question for this comes down to it, Mike, and I know they've been really happy with Nemetsnikov and the way this team is, the line with Ehlers and Perfetti have played lately. But do you think they have the confidence that as currently constituted, that line can handle the increased physicality and grind of the playoffs? And we've talked for a long time about that number 2 C-hole. And listen, Vlad has performed admirably. But do you think they have the confidence that if the playoffs were starting today, that they're good in that 2 line? Or is that 2C spot still very much on the top of the list of a potential add?
No, I think it is for sure, and it's no knock against Vlad Nemesnikov, but I think as what you just identified, and I think that's where these last 3 games, Huss, have been helpful for the Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff. Look at the games in Ottawa, in Nashville, and against Philly the other night. What common thread did they have besides the fact the Jets struggled to score a whole lot in those games, both at 5-on-5 and certainly on the power play? Those 3 opponents all brought a real physical tone, and the Jets, there was a price to be paid. Like they were on the receiving end of a lot of big, heavy checks. And while Ottawa and Nashville and Philly likely aren't going to be in the playoffs, I think Kevin Cheveldayoff can look at the way those games were played and say that there's a playoff element to that in terms of the physicality. And yeah, I mean, the Jets, they didn't win the last 2 of them. They really struggled to generate a whole lot offensively. And the last couple games anyways, the Nemesnikov line's gone a little cold. So yeah, I mean, I think in addition to maybe getting some guys with some size and some snarl, some physical players, I think the need for some secondary scoring is always going to be there because, again, going back to what I said earlier, you can never have too many weapons going into battle, and the playoffs become very tight. So there's certainly some potential names out there that, are scorers, guys that could be game breakers. And, I go back, Kenny Weeb and I, we put a list together last week of some potential names that, could check off the kinds of boxes. And a couple that I included on the list, one was Oliver Bjorkstrand from the Seattle Kraken, who I think he's now up to 16 goals. He scored last night. Interesting guy, interesting name. He's a good friend of Nikolai Ehlers. He's a right shot. Could be thrown into that middle six, provide some depth scoring. I mean, guys like Ricard Raquel, his name's out there. I don't think that's a realistic probability for the Jets. So, yeah, I mean, Brock Besser's name is suddenly out there now again today, Huss, with talk that the Canucks could be ready to move on if they can't come to terms on a new deal. If I'm the Jets and Brock Besser is available between now and Friday, I am absolutely sniffing around on that. So, yeah, I mean, I think for Winnipeg, a little more secondary scoring, someone that could potentially, whether it's a center or a winger, that could.
If it's a winger, where do they fit and who goes down? I mean, to me, there's such a clear need for an opportunity for an upgrade at center.
Well,
a lot more so than on the wing, at least in the top six.
Yeah, I'm looking almost at more like a top 9 because let's not forget, Huss, the Jets use Adam Lowry kind of like a second line center in terms of how much that line plays. And look, I like Mason Appleton. There's just not a whole lot offensively there. And I also feel like Nino Niederreiter, who's gone kind of cold here lately, I think there's a lot more for a guy like Niederreiter to unlock offensively. And I do wonder, I know we all like the Nino Lowry Appleton line as kind of a shutdown matchup line. But we've also seen Scott Arniel at various points move Lowry up with Ehlers and try to get something, a different look going, right? And so if I'm looking at it kind of from a top 9 perspective, or let's call it the middle 6, if we're talking about the Nemestikov and the Lowry line, I'm not entirely convinced that it just has to be a center to move Nemestikov, say, down to the 4th line. I think a winger that maybe moves Mason Appleton down, and now you have, and again, whether you then want to potentially have Ehlers and Lowry and something, or, mix and match. I just think something that's has a little more pop than Mason Appleton in your top 9. To me, that's where, like, those are the 2 areas I would identify. And you identified the first one, Nemestikov for sure, potentially upgrading there. But I would say Mason Appleton, because again, with the way that Lowry line is used, you could almost make the argument that Mason Appleton is kind of a second line right winger on this team, or at least a 2A, 2B. And is that enough? And so I think an upgrade there is something that could be explored as well. And maybe they explore both, right? Maybe you bring 2 pieces in.
The only thing I'll say about Appleton is that he is there for a clearly defined role, and it is to be an absolute dog on the puck, to forecheck, to check, to help win battles in the offensive zone, to cycle the puck, to do all those things. And listen, there's been some other guys that have been given opportunities there, and they always seem to go back to that. And listen, Appleton, whatever he scored this week, and he hasn't had the offensive year that he had last year when he actually outscored both Lowry and Niederreiter on that line. But I just wonder whether the minute you take him off and go to a different style of player, does the identity of that line change? Because that has been the identity line of the Winnipeg Jets. And that's why, I don't think they even, if you want it, Alex Iafallo was completely capable of playing in that spot, and you're not adding anyone, and you might be able to get him, who I think is a guy that can make a difference in both ends, involved a little bit more if you want to make a change to that. Like, I'm not sure that you're going to do that. And that's why I keep coming back to, Brock Nelson is the guy that, if you were able to get him, I know he doesn't have any term on his contract, but he's 6'4". He comes in, I think he automatically makes those guys that he's playing with a little bit bigger. And I mean, Cole Perfetti, I think, is ready for that next challenge, but is Cole Perfetti a more effective player with a little bit more size of a player that can actually bring some more offense to it? I would say yes. So to me, the most intriguing spot is that center hole as to whether there's a Stastny-like ad out there that we're not talking about. Or maybe if the Islanders can lose tonight, the Jets can blow their doors off tomorrow night, you sort of push Lou Lamoriello a little closer to potentially making that deal.
And then he just gives them Nelson right after the game on Wednesday to carry on.
Yeah, maybe in between periods. Change
Thursday,
lockers.
I guess. Yeah. Wednesday. Another guy, Scott Lawton's a name out there as well. Although I don't know that Lawton necessarily moves the needle, certainly not as much as Brock Nelson does. And, how much of an upgrade is Scott Lawton over Vlad Nemestikov? That's debatable for sure. Another thing, Huss, just to go back to your point about Appleton and the identity. I mean, another thing that could happen potentially that they try is if you bring in a center that, let's say, knocks Nemestikov down, I think we all assume that means Nemestikov goes to the fourth line and I guess knocks Rasmus Kupari out of the lineup. But you could also potentially experiment with Vlad Nemestikov moving to the wing and being on that line with Niederreiter and Lowry, because I think we would agree Nemestikov brings a lot of the qualities that Mason Appleton does, but perhaps with a bit more offensive skill and finish. So yeah, there's some possibilities for sure. And, it would be interesting to hear the discussions going on right now between Scott Arniel and Kevin Cheveldayoff about names out there. And I wonder if they have like a board somewhere where they're playing, mixing and matching. Okay, if we were to do this, what would it do to that? And where does this guy go and that guy go? That's where the Jets are in a good position, right? That they have they have a bit of a buffer. And so whatever they do by Friday, like there'll be time to kind of experiment a little bit. And for their sake, hopefully get it right come the playoffs. So assuming everyone's healthy, that they're putting the absolute optimized lineup out on game one.
Mike, moving on to the blue line. The names that Elliot mentioned today on 32 Thoughts that he could see the Jets being in on. Rasmus Ristolainen, who we saw here on Saturday. Big, like 6'4", 220. Mobile, I mean, he's the quarterback on their power play. And then Jamie Alexiak and Mario Ferraro. When we saw Ferraro with the Sharks, who I actually was quite impressed with as well.
I was too.
And listen, we also know that, Alexiak is sort of a more experienced, probably a little nastier version of Logan Stanley. Although credit to Stanley for throwing down with Delorier on Saturday. I mean, that's probably a top 5, top 3 tough guy in the league. So to answer that bell, I'm sure that went a long way with the coaching staff and with the players. But of those 3, which is the most attractive to you? And is that, I mean, because in my opinion, those are more than depth ads. Certainly Alexiak, certainly Ristolainen. Could we be seeing more than the Jordy Ben ads, or will it be a player like that?
Ristolainen's would be of those 3 would be the one at the top for a couple of reasons. He's younger than Alexiak. He's 30. Alexiak is 32. He's signed through 27-28, whereas Alexiak's just got one more year. And he's making 5.1 mil, so that's certainly very manageable. He's also a guy, Huss, who certainly earlier in his career, Ristolainen was a point-producing machine. He's lost a little bit of that offensive game, but I think this is a guy who was an 8th overall pick in 2013. Right shot, obviously, signed for a couple more years. And from all accounts, his defensive game, while his offensive numbers maybe aren't as big as they once were, he's got 19 points this year, just 4 goals. But that his defensive game has really improved. So to me, he would be the guy very much at the top of that list. Now, I know Jamie Alexiak. I know for a fact the Jets have long coveted Jamie Alexiak, that they have actually inquired about Jamie Alexiak in the past, that he's a guy that they certainly were at least looking to obtain. He's a guy that I think needs a fresh start out of that market for sure. He's even bigger than Ristolainen, 6'7", 252 pounds. I don't know that he plays quite that big, but there's certainly a lot to like with both those guys. Now, Mary Ferraro, he's the youngest of the three. He's only 26. Not nearly, his salary is lower, his offensive output is lower, but he's a guy, you watch him play, and I did when the Sharks were here last week. I loved everything about his game. He was making life miserable for a bunch of Jets. There is he is a shift disturber, that's for sure. And I got to think he would be rejuvenated to kind of go to a contender. He's also, the Sharks are terrible as a team, but they lean on him heavily, and he's doing a lot of really good things, average almost 21 minutes a game. I would almost have him as maybe second of those three behind Ristolainen. Another interesting guy is Luke Schenn. Now he's a lot older, 35, and he's signed for one more year. He can block shots, kill penalties. Again, there's a physical element for sure, and a high character guy. But to me, Kenny and I had all those names, Schenn, Ferraro, Ristolainen, and Alexiak in our piece last week. And, I think those are names for sure that the Jets are exploring. Ristolainen, to me, would be a significant add.
Let's talk about Mikko Rantanen for a minute. And, it's just such a unique situation where, a guy acquired in arguably the biggest midseason trade since Joe Thornton is reportedly back on the block because he hasn't signed a contract. Now, I'm not sure if you caught this today in ESPN, Reem, or Mike, but there is a piece on trades that they would like to see done before Friday. And I think these are done based on some level of knowledge of communications, not just literally pulling anything out of a hat. We know that the Hurricanes had been interested in Ehlers before, ironically for Nick Cash, who ended up being traded for Rantanen. Now, he's a UFA. Mikko Rantanen is a UFA. The deal that they have is that the Jets get Rantanen and Ehlers and Kupari go the other way. This is based on the premise, I think, that, nothing is guaranteed for either player beyond this season, and there's a very good chance the Jets are going to lose Ehlers, unfortunately. We haven't heard a lot of positive things about a potential run, although I do think, in my personal opinion, the best chance to keeping Ehlers would be have him be a big part of a team that has a great playoff run and does some special things in the playoffs, and I think it's harder to walk away from when you have that. But and we have heard the Jets have kicked tires on Rantanen. My question is that, if you just are basically trading Ehlers for Rantanen, certainly you're getting a bigger player that has done more in the playoffs, that, has the 50-goal seasons, albeit playing with Nathan McKinnon. But I'm not sure that isn't just sort of swapping one in and one out. And I will say this, while there's a lot of things that Rantanen brings to the table, there's a number of things that Ehlers brings that nobody else has. And I think that as a catalyst on that line, what he's done for the power play, even adding a guy like Rantanen, that is a big, big risk for the Jets. And I've kind of felt that they were going to run through this season with Ehlers, with the way that he's played, and then see what happens at the end. But thoughts on just how that would look, and is that enough? If you did that, are you not still talking about the center position, how that line, and is that just a significant change for a team that would be, listen, you can make an argument that Rantanen brings something that the Jets don't have right now.
Yeah.
But I would also argue that the unique nature of what Ehlers does for the Winnipeg Jets is impossible to replace, no matter how great of a player that you're bringing back in.
So a couple thoughts. I'm a big believer in the theory that the team that lands the best player wins a trade, even if there's other pieces and stuff. Like, it's a star-driven league. Stars are the ones that tend to tip the scales. Like, for all the oxygen we spend talking about fourth liners and third D pairs, at the end of the day, you kind of you kind of live or die, win or lose with your stars, right? If your stars go quiet, if your Vezina Trophy winning goalie struggles, if your top line gets neutralized, you're probably not going very far. So just on the principle that if that was offered, I'm doing that deal. Absolutely. Because to me, and I love Nikolai Ehlers, the player, but Mikko Rantanen, he's the best player. He would be the best player in that deal. So a chance to add Rantanen, if you add the best player, does that address all your needs? Certainly not. And I get what you're saying about, maybe swapping because we're talking wingers now, and you maybe lose the dynamic of what Ehlers can do. But I think the dynamic of what Rantanen could do, he's won a cup. He's going to be extremely motivated. And I say this with one caution. I'm not making that trade if I think there's a chance that I'm re-signing Nikolai Ehlers. I'm only doing that trade if it's pretty clear to me that no matter what happens, even if we go on and win the Stanley Cup, that Nikolai Ehlers is probably gone in the summer, then for sure. Here's the thing that I have yet to see an explanation, Huss, and maybe you've seen something out there. If you're the Carolina Hurricanes and you're talking about now potentially moving on from Rantanen, why aren't you so you're going to trade what's probably just going to be a rental to another contender? Aren't you a contender in Carolina? Why aren't you content with him as a rental and trying to expand the runway here to convince him to re-sign? Again, what if Carolina goes and wins the Stanley Cup with Rantanen being a big part of it? I mean, doesn't he probably re-sign? Doesn't at the end of June, doesn't it look a lot different than it does now?
You know what looks a lot different? The price. If he goes and wins another cup and does all that, probably what was on the table, if it wasn't good enough then, it probably certainly ain't good enough at the end of June if he's getting another ring.
Yeah, I just don't understand. It's not like the Hurricanes are a rebuilding team that made the trade because they really thought they could re-sign him, and now they've come to realize we made a terrible mistake. No, we can't. They're a legitimate contender in an Eastern Conference that feels pretty wide open. And so I don't even if Carolina today doesn't believe they can re-sign Mikko Rantanen, why are you moving him now? You're a contending team. He's not your own drafted and developed guy. I mean, I get that they've paid a big price in Marty Necas going the other way, who probably wasn't going to re-sign with him anyways. But I just don't understand the idea that Carolina would now move on because they don't feel they can sign him. To me, there should be a lot of time. That's a worry for another day. Just go try and win a cup with the really good player that you've added that, granted, hasn't really found his footing for whatever reason. It hasn't completely clicked. And maybe that's part of it, Huss, that people want instant gratification and an instant payoff. And Rantanen's kind of struggled, and Carolina hasn't exactly lit it on fire either. So people are like, well, this isn't going to work. But I mean, again, to me, the real test would be, what does it look like in the playoffs? And they're a good team that's going to be in a good spot. And I'd rather go into battle with Mikko Rantanen. I mean, again, I guess depending what some team offers you. But if I'm Carolina, and let's say that, why would I go acquire Nikolai Ehlers, who's a pending UFA, for Mikko Rantanen, who's a pending UFA? Again, I feel like you'd be giving away the best player. And no offense to Nikolai Ehlers, but I feel like you'd be lessening your chance of a successful playoff run. Just worry about the contract stuff later, I guess. But that's easy for me to say. I'm not a GM.
Yeah, I mean, listen, from my perspective, I would rather put the assets into, getting somebody from outside of the current team, using a first-round pick, a Colby Barlow, whatever.
Yeah.
To try to get a player to come in and add more to that second line, round out the top six for the Winnipeg Jets. I think they've got enough depth players. I mean, I think the guys, and again, you can acquire a guy or two on an expiring contract at not too big of a cost that can be in the mix in the bottom six, that can compete with the Kaparis and Gustafsons and Barons and whatnot for playing time. And listen, if you're going to go on a long playoff run, you're going to need a bunch of those guys. Guys get hurt. Guys, have to miss games. And we're saying the same thing on the blue line. But to me, like the needs of the Jets, I don't think have really changed. And it's been funny hearing more of us talking about wingers when to me, it's about the blue line and it still is about that center position if you can upgrade it and what that would mean. Because I think the benefit, not just to that line, but the other players around it, the trickle-down effect makes a lot more sense than getting a big-time winger to come in and then still figuring out how the center ice position is going to work.
And that's where, to me, Huss, I go back to a name that I've long thought, I know others have long thought, would just make so much sense. And I just don't know that there's a path for it to happen, specifically because I don't know what the player wants to do. But that'd be Ryan O'Reilly. Like, if we're talking impact players, the big swing, like that would be even bigger than Paul Stastny in 2018. Like, if you can convince Nashville, and we know the Jets and the Predators have done business before at the trade deadline. They got Nino Niederreiter here, and that worked out pretty well for the Jets. We also know old friend Barry Trotz is looking to shake up what's going on in Nashville. This is a dreadful lost year for them. To me, like Ryan O'Reilly, if there's a way to get Ryan O'Reilly, I'd pay whatever price is needed. I don't care that it's within the division and maybe it comes back to bite you down the road. I'd be going all in for Ryan O'Reilly. And I would also say the same thing if we're talking about the blue line and a big swing. I would be saying the same thing about Colton Parayko. To me, Colton Parayko would be such a difference maker for the Jets. And the trickle down that would have, if you put him with Morrissey, you could move DeMello down. Maybe you got DeMello and Dylan Sandberg together. Neil Pionk on your third pair. Like, I just think that those to me those are the big swings. Parayko, O'Reilly.
Hey, I got to ask you this. Do you think that's what the move would be? If you brought a guy in to come in and play the right side with Josh Morrissey, that DeMello would just move down to the second pair? I would be stunned if they broke up Pionk and Sandberg.
I know they like what the Hermantown duo are doing together for sure. And hey, if that's the trickle down, if Dylan DeMello's on your third pair, you're laughing. Like you've got a shutdown defenseman on your third pair. Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious play if you landed Colton Parayko, you're putting him with Josh Morrissey. They were just teamed together at the Four Nations, and Josh Morrissey looked exceptional. And Colton Parayko had a pretty good tournament as well. So, yeah, those are the big names to me. For all the talk of Rantanen for sure, that's a huge name that's out there. There's others, of course, Elias Pettersson. What are the Canucks going to do with him? And I just think if we're talking big names, but with a shred of realistic possibility of happening, Parayko on the blue line, O'Reilly at the center position. You bring in one of those guys, you've had a hell of a trade deadline, and you've made the league's best team, certainly at this point in the regular season, even better.
Mike, great stuff. Last one for you. I know it's been reported that the Jets have been in negotiations with a number of their players on potential extensions.
Yeah.
We're hearing, Murat was mentioning that he's hearing that potentially Neil Pionk is going to extend. What do you think a Pionk extension looks like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a chat with Neil Pionk on the road trip last week. I didn't get the sense that anything is imminent, but certainly I think it would be fair to say there's ongoing discussions. Kevin Cheveldayoff when he sat down with Murat and I in Denver in January, talked about, having some at least preliminary chats with various agents. And we know, of course, they've already got one deal done, one in-season extension done. Whether or not Neil Pionk is the next to go. So he's making $5.875. He's on the cusp of a career year offensively. I just think I think Neil Pionk, he's 29 years of age, and it's pretty clear he loves Winnipeg. He loves everything about this organization. Could this be a scenario where you see a Neil Pionk take a hometown discount? That is to say, take a little less than he'd get on the open market. And certainly doesn't look like a bumper crop of UFAs for offensive defensemen this summer, Huss. And I got to think a guy like Neil Pionk could command a significant price. Are we talking 6-7 million a year? Like, I just think whatever Neil Pionk settles at, if it's going to be with the Jets, it's going to be something under Josh Morrissey's salary. Almost like that's a bit of a cap. And I think the Jets, they wouldn't want to go really beyond that. So I realize I'm kind of hemming and hawing here. Josh makes 6.25. Like, is there a deal to be made with Pionk in the 5 to 6 range?
He's not taking a pay cut, Mike. And I mean, like, they also showed what the predictions, and again, take this for what it's worth, but I mean, all the UFAs and RFAs, there was a predictor, and the Pionk, like, the numbers of Pionk actually had him at 8.
Yeah.
No, he's not going to get that. But
not from the Jets.
I think that if he took the 6.25, they would probably give him the term.
Sure, you're going to give more term if a guy's willing to get his number a little lower, for sure. And so he's 29. Like, what kind of deal is he looking? Is this his last swing? Is he looking for 6? To take him to his mid 30s? If you're the Jets, would you prefer to go something shorter, like 4? Which leaves the door open for him to have another contract, whether it's with the Jets or another team at 33. And I think the Jets would want to keep that number down. So if that bumps the term up, I just think Josh Morrissey's 6.25. I can't see the Jets going beyond that with Neil Pionk. But if he would settle for something at or under that, then sure, you're going to give him a little more term. And I think with the cap going up and the projections of where it's going in the next few years, that would be a much smaller percentage as time goes on of your overall cap. And you can live with that for sure. I mean, clearly Dylan Sandberg likes Neil Pionk and vice versa. That's a good pairing. And we know this team likes to reward loyalty. They love stability. And so it wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, I'll go, just to complete off my head prediction. Let's say 5 years at $6 million per. I think that's a deal that would make sense for both sides. Granted, Neil Pionk could probably get more than that on the open market. And if he wants to go that route, sure. But does he want to win a cup? Like, does he want to go to the Chicago Blackhawks who want to, or San Jose Sharks or whoever have a bunch of cap space that they're willing to throw money at him, but the chances of winning a cup, I don't know. I don't know how much Neil Pionk puts value on that.
Yeah, I know. It is going to be really interesting. As I said, I believe Murat's thing said it was between 6 and 7 mil, 5 to 7 years. If they do want to keep it, I guess if there's some, listen, that Morrissey deal is so good that as you want to add players and continue to move forward, it's even if that's your goal is to keep that as our top defenseman makes this and no one else is making more than that, it's going to be tough to do business in that fashion.
It is
moving forward because that deal is so good. And certainly Josh will be rewarded when that contract is up, I'm sure, much like Mark Scheifele was at the end of a deal where he, by almost every measure, was probably underpaid for a number of seasons based on what they did before. Right. But I'm fascinated by this because I didn't really see the potential for this conversation at the beginning of the year. But the way Pionk has played, the numbers that he's put up, the connection with Dylan Sandberg, how good those two guys have been together, I kind of understand why they are seriously considering it and talking about it right now. And to your point, knowing that the grass isn't always greener, he's got a team. He's a big part of this team too. They love the guy, and he plays with a bit of an edge that a lot of those other players don't, albeit not a huge guy. It's just such a good pairing with Dylan Sandberg. I think they'd like to keep that together. And, the question as to how much it will cost to keep Pionk and what he's willing to take here in Winnipeg and for how long it's not something I really thought we'd be talking about trade deadline week, but considering that I think having that sort of cap certainty and knowing what you have invested and who's on the team for a number of years probably helps you a lot when it comes to thinking about acquiring players and what else is out there.
Well, and that's where what happens between now and Friday and how it potentially could tie into Neil Pionk is interesting. Because let's just say there is a world where Colton Parayko becomes available. He signed through 29-30. So, and he's a right shot, and you've got Dylan DeMello here. And so are you going to go out and now extend Neil Pionk for a number of years? And if so, where does Elias Salamonson, your top D prospect, who's having a great year with the Moose, who I've seen people say he's going to be the Dylan Samberg, he's going to be the right shot Dylan Samberg in a few years in terms of all the quiet but really, really, really good things he can do. And we know the Jets didn't bring Brendan Dillon last year, and a big reason for that is they wanted to open up a spot for Dylan Samberg to move up the lineup. So, Dylan DeMello's now, he re-upped for a long time. If you go get a defenseman between now and Friday, Huss, that has a lot of term and is a right shot, where does everybody fit in? And is that something, again, do you worry about that down the road? Maybe, but it is something to for sure keep an eye on when it comes to Neil Pionk, and just making sure there's at least a pathway. If you have a young player like Salamonson that you feel, and that entry-level contract could come in handy as well. But if you feel you got to create a spot for him in the next year or two, how are you doing that if your right side is completely locked up?
Are you suggesting that a young defenseman may have his path to the NHL blocked by veterans with the Winnipeg Jets? I don't see that as a possibility.
We haven't seen that storyline
never happened.
play out. Did you see, by the way, on that topic, so the Jets, they wished Ville Heinola a happy birthday today, but turns out his birthday was actually a couple days ago. I guess they didn't acknowledge, they missed it. And their tweet said something like, "Sorry, we missed it." To which I saw some fan who's a Ville supporter said, "Don't worry, you're not the only one in the organization who's forgotten about Ville Heinola." Yikes. Ouch.
Well, listen, I don't know what the future is for Ville. It'd be interesting to see whether he's a piece that might find a new landing spot on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, he's a piece. I don't think he's a primary piece at this point in a trade.
No.
He would be a complementary / throw-in piece. I still go back to what I think we talked about previously on the show. Like, if I'm the Jets, I don't know. I don't know where I stand on this anymore. Like, I was going to say, if he's insurance, if like Josh Morrissey and Neil Pionk somehow both got hurt, and now you're really scrambling for but I say that, I go back to last Saturday in St. Louis when Josh Morrissey wasn't in the lineup and the game went to overtime and Ville was in the lineup and they rolled 3 different defensemen out there: Neil Pionk, Dylan Samberg, Dylan DeMello. Those were your 3. They didn't even look Ville's way in 3-on-3 overtime. So I don't know. I mean, I was going to say, I feel like he's potential insurance and more value to them as insurance right now going into the playoffs. And then you can figure out what you're doing with them this summer. But I guess if a team that you're talking trade with between now and Friday mentions Ville as a piece that they're interested in, yeah, I mean, if you're the Jets, I don't think you hesitate to make that move, because I think it's become abundantly clear here, Huss, that there's not really a path anymore for him when it comes to full-time work in this organization.
Well, that'll be another topic and a potential piece going the other way that we'll be paying attention to all week long. Mike, thanks so much for doing this. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet, Huss. Enjoy the week.
Good stuff. There is Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press. All right, we're going to hear from Kyle Connor. He spoke before the team jumped on the bird. By the way, pushing 500 to get in chat. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, please. And do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button as well while you are watching it. While we do that, before we hear from Kyle Connor, Let's give a big cheers over to our friends at Little Brown Jug, Winnipeg's favorite local brewery.
And day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Jets back in action tomorrow, all week. Some early games, 6:30s. Great time to get together with your gang over at Boston Pizza. Pick a player contest where if the player you pick on the Jets scores, you'll get to spin the BP prize wheel for some great BP food prizes and swag from Royal Sports. And, of course, ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and the big game on the big screen with full sound at all BP locations. And if you are staying at home tonight or any night, you can always get the great taste of Boston Pizza by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. And, Royal Sports is ready for spring. Tons of new stock coming in by the day. But for you Winnipeg Jet fans, now is a great time to go down, maybe get working on the playoff whites. Maybe you'll wait till Friday to see how the roster looks before figuring out exactly who you're going to finalize the name and number on your jersey for. Royal Sports does it all. But with St. Patrick's Day coming up and more, definitely get down and check out the incredible hat wall they have with the special one-off collabs with New Era that they've done. You want a cool green Jets hat for St. Patrick's Day? They've got some amazing models and styles, and again, some color matchups that you haven't seen anywhere else. All their Royal Sports right now at 750 Pembina Highway. While you're at it, make sure to check out all the cool stuff on the King's Skate, Snow, and Surfside, including their amazing Yeti cooler section with a bunch that have just come in Winnipeg Jets colors as well. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And hey, gang, I mentioned earlier that we are going into OT on our Health Sciences Center Foundation campaign. We got a week left, hoping to top up, which has already been a very successful campaign, helping purchase new equipment for the HSC's Adult Emergency Department and help HSC deliver tomorrow's healthcare today. We've got a link in the description of the video and the podcast and in the chat. If you are able to, any donation over $25 will get you a tax receipt and entered into a contest for a signed jersey from the Winnipeg Jets. You've got until Friday to do that, but the sooner the better. Appreciate everyone that supported the Health Sciences Center Foundation so far. And I did mention this earlier on, but if you popped in a bit later, we were sold out for our final WST game of the year. But good news, we've managed to get some more seats added. So if you would like to join us as we look to go 6-0 on Friday, March 28th against the New Jersey Devils, go to winnipegjets.com/WST, click on that final game against New Jersey and get your tickets now. Your ticket includes a beverage of your choice as well that'll be delivered through the Jets 360 app. So if you haven't joined us yet, what are you waiting for? Grab those tickets. And if you have, let's get the crew back together one more time and try and go a perfect 6-0 at Canada Life Center this year for the WST Game of the Month. Final game of our schedule is Friday, March 28th. All right, we will get to the Coolbet lines in a minute. Bunch of games tonight in the National Hockey League. But let's hear from Kyle Connor and Davis Payne, who spoke earlier today. Let's actually start off with Davis, because I think a lot of people interested in the power play. It's still number one in the league. It's still in excess of 30%, but a few missed opportunities that could have resulted in wins with the power play over the last couple games. Here's Davis Payne on just where things are at and how they evaluate that power play.
We look at it, like I've said all along, as part of process and how we're operating. There's a lot of different things that start with fundamental keys for us. Are we doing those things, or do we have the right mindset going out there? And if so, what is the next level of execution? Teams kill differently in certain situations, so we have to be ready for that and have our adjustments ready to go. At the same time, even when the puck's going in the net, there's parts of the process that aren't where they need to be, and so that's what we focus on. If their goaltender makes some saves, or if the puck doesn't go in, it's about how it looks, how we're operating, and all the detail pieces, and that's what we focus on.
Right, Davis Payne, the architect of the #1 power play in the league, spoke to whether teams are adjusting a little bit more after seeing what the Jets have done through 3/4 of the season.
Oh, teams make adjustments all the time. It's not just because we've had success. I mean, our penalty kill makes adjustments against the other team's power play, knowing what's coming in and what their strengths are. And so teams are trying to take away our strengths much the same as we're trying to take away the strengths of their power play. So that happens every game.
So how are those details on your power play lately? The last 5 games, the good and the bad?
Last 5 games, I would give you 2 average, probably maybe a little below, 1 not good, and then 2 we can work with what we've seen the last 2.
I guess it might be 6 with that go around. Maybe 6 games? Yeah. So if you add 1 more to that?
Yeah, it's I mean, sometimes it's going in, sometimes it's not. I mean, it's just like had they go in, we don't have the conversation, but at the same time, we're having a conversation about details, fundamentals, and mindset.
All right, Davis Payne. One more from Davis Payne, and this is on what he wants to see from his group tomorrow on Long Island.
I think it's mostly us playing not only our game with our detail with it, but at our pace. And I think that's something that, whether it's an outlet here or an execution play there, is something that we can always clean up. And I think if you look at the last Islander game before the break, there was a little bit of a downshift in the pace of that game. We want to crank it back up.
All right. So let's hear from Kyle Connor. KFC spoke with the media. He has been a little snake bit over the course of the past week. Of course, he had the shootout winner against St. Louis last Saturday after he'd had, 10 shots on goal in the game, had 16 attempts against the Predators. And again, goals were tough to come by in that game against Friday. Here's Connor on having the opposition goaltender as the first star 2 games in a row.
Yeah, that's certainly not what we want to see every single night. It's where this team has shown throughout the course of the year that we can score, and we can score in different types of ways. Top to bottom, power play, scoring out the rush, in zone. So I don't think we've been, one-dimensional in any way. I just think that it could just be a stretch that we're going through that you kind of see it throughout the year, and I can't remember a time throughout this year that we've had something like this many games in a row with this many quality chances. And what you have to do is look forward to the next game. You have to stay positive. You have to take the the strengths of what you've done. Yeah, we're generating a lot, so build on that, and then keep learning and moving on. That's kind of been our theme of the whole year. Is it's what about that next game? What can we learn from that game, and then apply that to the next game. So that's kind of the mentality I'm taking, and I think the team is as well.
Yeah, the irony of these last couple of games, that even though they've been against Nashville and Philadelphia, who probably will not be participating in the playoffs, they've been heavier, more physical, and tight checking games that sort of feel like the playoffs. Kyle Connor talked about just these last couple of real tight 1-goal games that they've been in.
Yeah, you see it every year. It's play only elevates and gets tougher, and the ice is. The space out there gets less and less, and guys tighten up, and the games become so much more magnified every single shift. And you see that teams are pushing for their lives right now on the bubble, and so are we. We're pushing. We want to be the best team we can, and collect as many points as we can, and secure that first spot in the West. But it's no excuse though. Like it's only going to get harder. It's this is what it is right now. What's it going to be like game 1 of the playoffs, and we got to build ourselves for that, and that's what we're keeping reminding ourselves for. And if we ever get into this stretch of a period or 2, it's we can look back and, hey, this is how we got out of it. We put pucks in that, we kept it simple, we we stayed positive, we leaned on each other, and we got through something like this.
Interesting stuff from Kyle there. That is maybe the first time I think we've ever heard one of the players very clearly state what their goal is right now, and it should be first place in the West. I'm totally here for it. In the past, we've always said, well, we're going to take things one game at a time and focus on this. The challenge and opportunity is very clear for Winnipeg. Would you love to raise a President's Trophy banner? Sure. Would you love to get to the Stanley Cup final and have home ice? Yeah. But right now in the short term, lock down the Central Division, stay above the Dallas Stars, lock down the Western Conference, and play wild card team number 2 in the first round. Of course, the deadline is coming up as well. Sometimes not the easiest week for NHL players. Kyle Connor certainly isn't going anywhere, but here's what Kyle Connor had to say about whether he thinks about the trade deadline coming up on Friday.
Not really thinking about it. That stuff will take care of itself. Obviously we got tremendous trust in our organization, our management to do whatever they see fit to help this team, and that's their job. I'm sure they're looking at this every single day from the beginning of the year, playing over scenarios of if we're in a position like we are in, or if not, and what we're going to do, what guys are available, and so you can control what you can control. Whoever, if we get some, if we don't get somebody, if we move players, whatever happens, I think this is a good foundation in this room to be able to adapt and obviously we're in a pretty good position to, hopefully add here and make our team better. But you never know. Maybe it's something that we don't want to tweak. It's, I don't want to put words out there, but it's, I don't know. But obviously we trust Chevy, and he's going to do the best job he can to make this team Stanley Cup champion.
All right. Well, the goal is pretty clear. We just heard it from Kyle Connor and what they're going for. And I'll say one thing about Connor, barring. I can't imagine what scenario would take place where Kyle Connor is not playing with Mark Scheifele and Gabriel Velarde on that number 1 line. Like what it would take to change that up. And I mean, the power play as well. Nicola Ehlers, Josh Morrissey, and those 3 guys. So his world probably won't change very much on a micro level, but could the team look different? Absolutely. And there probably will be a couple of new faces. Hey, one more that we skipped, we should get to. This is just one more from Davis Payne. And he was just asked about if some of the lack of consistent success that they'd enjoyed all year long on the power play has something to do with the break for the Four Nations. Here's what he had to say on that.
Can't answer that for you. I mean, lots of teams have come out of it done well. Lots of teams have, sort of different pieces of their game. It's not just a power play. It's different pieces of your game are sort of misfiring. And that's the challenge this time of year because it's tough hockey out there and it's tough for the last 20, tough going in.
Yeah, and Kyle was just out here saying, can't remember the last time he had a stretch where maybe he had as many quality shot attempts and chances. So just a tough stretch of maybe some poor puck luck has to do with it as well.
Well, I never put a lot of stock into puck luck. I look at it like, it's baseball season. So are we having good at bats? We've had last 2 games, we've had good at bats. We've hit the ball at their defense. So they've made the plays. They've got outs. Next time we will hit it to the open grass, if you will.
All right. So there's Davis Payne. That's some good analogies in there, Reem. Making it happen.
Man, I don't know how I feel. I thought it was pretty good, actually. I think the Jets have been putting together some good at-bats in terms of power play opportunities, but you're hearing, at-bats, trying to put the ball, we're hitting it hard right at the defenders. You're talking about run support. Jets know they're playing hockey here. Maybe that's why they lost 2 in a row. Too much.
It's feeling spring. Spring. Baseball, Stanley Cup playoffs right around the corner, trade deadline. No, that was fun. But listen, Davis, we don't hear from him a lot. Usually it's Coach Arneal. But, nice to get a little insight as to where his head's at with the power play right now that for the first time all season long is in, a bit of a cold streak. But as I mentioned, still at 30.5 on the season. It'd be nice to get a bit of a hot streak and get those numbers back up to record-breaking levels where they've been for the better part of the season.
Yeah, I guess it's just hard to sustain that for so long. The goalies are going to make some saves at some point. We certainly saw that when they had power plays against Saros and Fedotov. Speaking of baseball terminology, Turd Ferguson bringing up Rutger McCrory, you said this team's got a bunch of ball players. That was on with us. Was the last after they won the World Juniors. So you can use a ton of baseball analogies, baseball terms when it comes to hockey. It is spring, so fun to bring up.
By the way, hey, still well over 400 in the chat, and we're only at 151 thumbs ups. Can we get this to 200, please? If you haven't hit the thumbs up and you're with us, just go over, hit that thumbs up. Helps us. It's a big week. We want to start off well with the 200 like show and get us. I know some people asking about Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday is going to be fun. We'll have some of our favorites. We'll have a little fun talking about the best of 1,000 shows, our highlights. And it's good because normally we kind of do that in and around our anniversary, but the anniversary being the 8th is a Saturday, and the 7th is, of course, our extended trade deadline show where we'll fire it up at 11 a.m. and take you through 3:30, maybe even 4. We will do a marble race. It might be a little later than normal depending on what's going on. And who knows, maybe if you're lucky, we'll do a special marble race on show 1,000 as well, because certainly that's one of the more popular features of the WST show as it's morphed through now 998 shows. Tomorrow, don't miss show number 99. I know there were some people that wanted us to talk about the Elimination Chamber and John Cena. I will touch on that at the end of the show, but let's head over and get ready for tonight over with our friends at Coolbet and the Coolbet lines for today. It's a fun time, especially for people like me that love curling and betting on curling. Great starts by our Manitobans. Reed Carruthers, big win last night over Kevin Cooey. He's 3-0. And, of course, Matty Dunstone, also 3-0. When we click on the evening draws, or I guess 3:30 technically here. This is the afternoon draw. Mike McEwen, who's had a real nice start. He's taking on Quebec. Brad Jacobs, who was the favorite to win the event coming in, he's 3-0, or 2-0, I guess, will be 3-0 today, likely as a minus 333 favorite. 4.5 rock favorite against Alberta. We've got Ontario minus 625 against the Yukon, and Saskatchewan, a huge, for these massive runs, sometimes we just end up going to the rock line. But yeah, Brad Jacobs yesterday beat, I believe it was the Territories 20-2. I have never heard of a 20 spot put up in curling.
20?
But it happened last night. Yeah, it was 15-1. Their opponents got 1, and then they put 5 up in the 8th and won 20-2. So things going well. Brad Gushu in Canada also 3-0. So it seems the cream is rising to the top early right now in the Brier. There'll be matches tonight at 8:30. So to check that draw a little later on, the odds will be up over at Coolbet. But NHL tonight, we've got 6 games. The all of a sudden struggling Washington Capitals are at home to the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa plus 125, Washington minus 147. This is a big game for Ottawa. After what Columbus did on the weekend, winning both of their games, well, the game heading into the outdoor game and then winning the Stadium Series game in front of 95,000, they've got a 2-point. They're at 68, then Detroit at 66, and then a whole bunch of teams chasing at 64. Ottawa can get a little closer with a win tonight. I don't mind Ottawa plus 125 tonight. We're not putting it on the parlay, though. Battle of Florida, Tampa and the Panthers. The Lightning, now the hottest team in the league, having won 8 in a row. They're plus 135 against the Panthers, who are minus 159. I imagine Seth Jones will be in the lineup tonight for the Panthers. You've got Buffalo and Montreal. Buffalo, who lost to Montreal 4-2 on the weekend. Can they get them back? I kind of like their chances tonight. They're minus 103. Habs minus 114. Same number in the Islanders-Rangers game. Quick with the shutout last night. Shesterkin's going tonight for the Rangers. Minus 114 for New York. Minus 103 for the Islanders. And then we've got the Leafs. Minus 357 favorites against the Sharks. If you want to jump on them at a more reasonable number, you can get them to win by 2 at minus 137. And then the final game is the Kings and the Blackhawks. LA minus 263. The Blackhawks plus 215. Total in that game is 5.5. Just checking out these trade deadline numbers. The Seth Jones is obviously off the board. Dylan Cousins still there. But the number for Mikko Rantanen keeps dropping for any other team. It was like plus 350. It was plus 2 something last week. Now it's plus 190. Rima, where are you at on this? Mikko Rantanen. Does he get traded? Because if you think he will get traded, it's plus 190 to any other team, him being on the March the 8th.
Yeah, wasn't it like plus 3 something last week when he looked at this? And I was like, well, he's number 1. I thought that was way better odds. I'm not as sure at plus 190.
Well, what that's telling us is there's more and more smoke that it really could happen.
Yeah, well, he was number 1 like on some of the trade boards when it was put out. So I was like, well, if he's number 1 and it's plus 300, then I think it's good. I'm not sure. The closer this goes, maybe they decide to hang on, use him as an own rental. They thought they could sign him, and he seems, what's the line? It's going too fast for him. It's too many life choices to make at one time. Moving to a new city, a new team, you're not really, producing that well. So he wants to wait it out. I think they're gonna keep him unless they get blown away. Always put the caveat: unless you get blown away with some crazy. Whatever. They gave up a lot to get him. I don't think they'll be able to get back what they gave. So, although they did speculate on that deal on ESPN and Ehlers for Rantanen swap. If they thought they could sign Ehlers, then I could see that a deal like that makes sense for them. If
they're able to continue it out, but I don't know whether they're able to do that beforehand. And again, I'm not even sure the Winnipeg Jets would be comfortable doing that. I think Ehlers is too integral to their top 6, to their power play. If anything, I think they add to try to get someone to play with Ehlers and Perfetti, as we talked about with Mike a little earlier on. We did do a parlay tonight. We're going to take Buffalo and Montreal to avenge their loss on Saturday. We're going to take Tampa to keep it rolling against the Panthers. And we're going to take the Leafs to beat the Sharks by 2. That one, we got a nice boost on that. It was plus 701 when we made it. It's boosted up to plus 808 in the combo cards at the top of the page. Some other nice odds tonight. The Perfect Storm. We've got the Lamplighters. The Perfect Storm. What's this? Brandon Hagel to get a point and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander to hit over 2 or more 3-pointers tonight. That's the Lightning and the Thunder. I see what Jake and Pat did. Very nicely done there, gentlemen. The Lamplighter tonight is Ovechkin and Matthews both to score, plus 320. The points from the point is Chychrun, Rasmus Dahlin, and Victor Hedman all to get a point. That's plus 734. And what's the DGen Den cracking up today? Connor McMichael, shots on goal over 1.5. Habs and Buffalo both to score at least 2 goals. And Phil Deneau over 1.5 shots. Plus 476. I'll get in on that. Always love when the DGen Den is kicking up their options. One other thing, we got TGL. Now, the TGL is playing right now, the Bay versus LACC, 6 o'clock tonight. Boston Common versus New York. Boston Common's Rory McIlroy's team. They're really up against it. New York can clinch the final playoff spot with a win. Boston Common's the favorite. I'll be taking New York at minus 103. And I'll look forward to watching some of that. Final matchup is tomorrow. Justin Thomas and his Atlanta Drive versus Tiger Woods Jupiter Links. Atlanta is the minus 167 favorite. It's all up there waiting for you at coolbet.com. You can check out our exclusives from the Lock Shop and more. Jets, by the way, still 11-1 to win the Cup. That's in the NHL futures. If you haven't played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. All right, before we go, Reem, it was the WWE Elimination Chamber. And listen, this is not something we normally dive into too much, but I've had too many people asking for comment on the shocking end with the heel turn of John Cena, a fan favorite for his 20-plus years in the business. A moment we never saw it. Did you watch it? And what was your reaction?
I saw the highlight on X, so I didn't watch it live. I saw it after. I don't know. I'm not like a huge Cena guy, Huss. I feel bad for all the kids, to be honest, that he's helped throughout his career. He's done a lot of work with Make-A-Wish Foundation. I don't know how he could turn his back on them.
All-time leader in wishes granted by the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Like, I feel for all the kids watching. It's being compared to Shawn Michaels super kicking Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window, compared to Hulk Hogan joining NW. Like, is it really that big? I don't watch a lot of the events. I do follow it on X, so I know the storylines. I thought this was supposed to be Cena's last hurrah, and now supposed to hate him.
Well, that's the weirdest thing. But man, did it get everyone talking about it. So he's teamed up The Rock. They're looking to make him the corporate champion. A storyline, a tried and true storyline, as old as the business. The guy that's in cahoots with the shot callers. But yeah, they beat the heck out of Cody Rhodes, along with Travis Scott, who was smoking a blunt in the ring while much of this was happening. Another bizarre side of what was going on in Toronto on the weekend. But
yeah, I'm not a big Travis Scott guy. Yes.
Me neither. I'll be honest. I'm not familiar with his work other than he's there it is. Just shocking, putting the brass knuckles on and giving it to Cody Rhodes. So there's a lot of little kids that woke up questioning everything that they've learned in their entire life about hustle, loyalty, and respect from John Cena. It's going to make Raw some fun. And I guess Mania is April 19 and 20.
Yeah.
So this is going to move on for the next little bit. I will say this. This probably goes through. He'll win the title at WrestleMania. And I'm not sure how many more months he's going to actually be part of WWE. But I think you can bank on it that by the end, he'll come to his senses. He'll return to hustle, loyalty, and respect. And he'll retire as the most decorated, but also maybe the most popular champion of all time. It was wild. Yes, finish the story, Remo. We'll see.
Is someone going to come out and help Cody Rhodes again at WrestleMania? Remember last year they had all the epic run-ins?
Yes.
We're going to get that again, that type of finish. I'm here for that. So I've seen Stone Cold and Poncho, the Cat, are working out the rumors that he was going to come last year, but did not. They brought in the Undertaker. So I want to see Poncho in the ring.
Stone Cold talking to his cat is one of the great internet memes of all time. The other thing that I'll mention.
That's real life. That's
not meme. Yeah, sorry. The videos, I should say. But if you woke up and you were, say you went to the game on Saturday night, and you went out to the bar and you stayed out late, and then you just went home and went to bed, and then you just pulled up your phone on Sunday morning, chances are your feed was one of two things: John Cena turning heel, or Shane Gillis hosting SNL. Reem, surely you caught some of Gillis's act on Saturday night.
I actually didn't. I saw the things on X and what everyone's calling that one skit the best skit ever.
The couple of beers.
The couple of beers. So I'm going to have to watch it. I didn't. I had a busy...
You have not yet seen it?
No, I scrolled past it every time.
Okay, I cannot endorse a skit more than the Shane Gillis couple of beers skit. It is truly all-time good. I do wonder though, and I was talking about this with Dusty, if Gillis didn't get preemptively canceled after being hired by SNL the first time, would he be as big a star as he is now?
No.
Probably not.
You know, that's just how it works out for some people. You know, we did have SNL 50, and there are a number of people who were there for a very short time. It didn't work out for them, and then they went on to do bigger things. Tim Robinson, one of them. Ben Stiller, he quit. Had enough. Larry David as well was there briefly. You know, that that scenario, doesn't work for everyone. Some people are able to, use it as a springboard, or some people go on and you never hear from them again. And some people audition and don't get on and go on to great careers. So I'll agree that maybe you wouldn't know who he was, or maybe he would have written some great stuff and he would have made his way, would have taken a bit longer.
Well, the funny thing is, and again, not to get political, but I mean, part of the reason why, he was always probably a little bit more, or at least joking about some of the conservative side of things. And I think everyone knows, I mean, that SNL room for a decade has been, for lack of a better term, the wokest place in entertainment. So that probably wasn't a great fit, but then you bring him back as a comedy superstar and adding that in. And I mean, like, that show and the clips that many people have seen, if they didn't watch it live, is about as good as it gets, or certainly as good as it has been in a long time. So anyways, check out the Couple of Beers skit. The news anchor one was completely over the top. The wedding. And that's the other thing. He's sort of a machine. Like, you would know better than me, Remis, but like, hosts usually are involved in how many skits would they be in a regular SNL?
They're usually in all of them, mostly. So I don't know how many they do per show, but like, yeah, they're pretty active. But maybe it's, because he's actually a comedian, he's maybe pitching ideas his style, or more involved than.
Well, for sure, that was the case.
And I think you could tell. Yeah,
he wrote that one. There's zero chance that he wasn't, like, he didn't come to them, okay, this is the skit with a Couple of Beers. So anyways, if you haven't seen it, check that out. Some pretty funny stuff from Shane Gillis. And again, we got the big comedy festival coming up here this year. Hopefully we'll be doing something with them on some tickets and some opportunities for people to join us on the program. Folks, that's going to do it for us. We're going to get this podcast up so people can listen on their way home. Thanks again to all the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day. Thanks to Michael Traikos and Mike McIntyre for coming on. Remo doing a great job behind the scenes, getting us all set up. Big week, though. Rest of the week, you know what's going down. Show 1000 on Wednesday, and a super-sized Trey's Deadline show. We're going to start at 11 in the morning on Friday, so turn your notifications on so you remember that we're live, and we will take you through trade deadline day, focusing on the Winnipeg Jets and all the other deals around the league. We'll have plenty of guests to join us, and hopefully a few special ones as well midweek, if you know what I'm saying. That is going to do it for us. Enjoy your evening. Tomorrow, game day edition, Jets and Islanders will be all over it tomorrow, beginning at 1, live on YouTube, and tomorrow afternoon in your podcast feed. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.